One of the coolest stable operating systems to always have in your toolkit is Whonix. Whonix has always been one of my personal mainstays in my arsenal of Linux operating systems, especially since it's so different. So strap yourselves in, since people love them distro reviews, let's learn about Whonix. Whonix is not your traditional Linux operating system. Most people install Linux on real computers or virtual machines or even servers, but Whonix exclusively works on virtual machines and nowhere else. Whonix requires that your computer supports virtual machines, but not just one virtual machine, but two virtual machines. Their Workstation virtual machine and their Gateway virtual machine. And you're going to need to have both of these in order to use it. Whonix is incredibly distrustful of their Workstation virtual machine because this is where you conduct all of your normal activities that you'd expect to do on your desktop operating system like Windows, Mac, and Linux. Whonix filters everything through the Tor network using a second lighter virtual machine, the Gateway. So you do all of your main activities in the Workstation and you do all of your networking activities through the Gateway. Now, if you were running Whonix on just one virtual machine, you would say, well, that would probably be more efficient for my memory, right? Well, the issue is a virus or a phishing email or something malicious could, in theory, turn off the anonymity protections that something like Whonix gives you, because Whonix filters all of your traffic through the Tor network. By using multiple virtual machines, malicious programs can't just turn off Tor, which is being run through the Gateway from the Workstation. They'd have to leave the virtual machine system in order to do so. And there are lots of great virtualization systems, but Whonix only supports KVM and VirtualBox, so you can't use like Hyper-V or VMware. You have to use KVM and VirtualBox. Companies like Red Hat, Google, and Amazon have a vested interest in preventing people from escaping virtual machines and doing harm to their users in their data centers. Not only do we need to have a good computer, like one decent enough to run at least two operating systems, including the one that you run your normal computer with, and second, you can't use an Apple computer. At least an Apple computer uses Apple Silicon. So you need to use a Windows or Linux machine. But preferably you should use a Linux machine. And that's what I'm going to focus on with here, because a lot of people have covered the VirtualBox install. The VirtualBox install is actually substantially easier. But I'm going to be doing the KVM install because we're going to do it right. We're going to do it with Linux and we're going to do it with KVM. Finally, the last oddity of Whonix is Whonix is based off of Debian. Now, instantly, everyone is already like gasping, what? You're supporting a Debian-based operating system? Impossible. The Whonix developers have actually implemented a lot of kernel hardening that prevents a lot of the security issues that are just part of the default Debian installation, and have implemented further kernel hardening measures on top of it. So if you are going to use Debian, which I don't really recommend, but if you're going to use Debian, using Whonix is possibly one of the best ways to do it. So if you go to Whonix's website, all you have to do is you just go and click on the download link. And that will bring you to this page right here, which you can actually download the version that you want. So you also have a VirtualBox, and you also have KVM and all of these other methods. But a lot of these other methods aren't really tested. So like if macOS and USB, for example, they aren't really tested. So you really just want to stick with KVM and VirtualBox. I mean, Windows is basically just VirtualBox, so you know, if you click on it, I'll tell you. But we're going to focus on KVM, and then immediately people are going to be overwhelmed because they're going to be dumped into this massive guide on how to use KVM. But if it's any compensation, most of this is just like installing KVM. So if you've already have KVM installed, I have a video where I did that. You can just use that instead. And then what you also want to do is you also want to verify your installation. So first you want to verify your download. So if you go here where it says download Whonix KVM key, so if you just do Control S, you can save it and then you can just put it wherever. So the first thing you want to do is you want to CD into the folder that you installed Whonix onto. So I'm just going to do CD downloads, and then I'm just going to call it Whonix. And then it's going to be in this folder. And then what you want to do is you want to go here and then copy paste these commands. They actually have a series of commands that you can do in order. And then just make sure you just put all of your files in here. So remember, what you're going to need is you're going to need this file, the virtual machine archive. You're going to need the KVM key, which is hulahoop.asc. So what you do is you run this command, and then when you go over to verify your file, you know that what you're receiving is going to be correct. And when the file is checked, what you want to do is you actually want to make sure that it says good signature, because if it doesn't say good signature, you can't trust the file. So next, what we need to do is we need to agree to the Whonix license agreement. Now, I have read the Whonix license agreement, and I think it's a very fair license agreement, but I would invite that you read it too. I'm not going to try to cover all of it here, but what it basically says is they cannot be held responsible for anything that you do with Whonix. You can do whatever you want, but you cannot hold them responsible, and as a result, you cannot hold me responsible. And I will use this as a reminder that if you use any of these Tor-related anonymity programs, you do so at your own risk. Do not do illegal activity on the Tor network. Do not rely on Tor to protect you or your anonymity if you do illegal activity. What you're going to want to do is to accept a license agreement, and you're going to have to if you actually want to continue with the video. So what you have to do is you have to do touch Whonix binary license agreement _ accepted. And you know, you have to accept it, or else you know, maybe watch something else. Next, what you want to do is you want to enter in all of these commands. I'm not going to go through all of them in detail, but what you need to do is you need to set this up because this is the virtual network that Whonix uses, because it doesn't use the conventional networking system that's used in virt-manager. And then what you want to do is you want to go over here and you want to copy these commands so it'll move all of the files to the correct place. And don't freak out when you see the files, because you'll see that they're about 100 gigabytes large. You actually don't need to worry about that, because if you use the sparse command here, these images won't occupy 100 gigabytes. They just look like they're 100 gigabytes, and they'll just slowly fill up as you go. I highly doubt anyone will be storing 100 gigabytes of stuff in here. I mean, maybe you have some saucy anime you'd like to share with me, so you know, let me know if you've got any saucy anime you'd like to share in that 100 gigabyte Whonix Workstation install of yours. What I'm going to do is I'm going to open virt-manager here, and this is after you run all of these. And look at that, we now have a Whonix Gateway. So the order of this is actually incredibly important. So the first thing you're going to want to do is you want to run a Whonix Gateway. And you need to run Whonix Gateway first, because you have to remember, running Gateway is how you connect to the internet. So run Gateway first. This is your bridge to the Tor network. And you just click the play button, and then you let it run. You'll be presented with two modes here. So the first option here is, you know, what you'd expect, anyone who's used Linux would expect. The top one is what your default boot option is. But you'll notice that there's a second option here for live mode user for daily activities. Now, this mode is actually removes all persistence on your operating system. So when you use this live user mode, anything you do in this live mode will not be saved. So you need to be just be aware of that. So if you, especially if you're using Gateway, because literally nothing happens on Gateway, especially for most people. So all you want to do is you just want to run this normal one. So run the normal one if you want to update your virtual machine, and then run this live one when you're not planning on updating. So I'm just going to run the live one right now, not with persistence, so I can update the machine and change some basic settings. And then what this does is it boots into a Debian TTY system. Now, you'll see at the top right here, there's a default username and a default password. And the default username is user, and the default password is change me. Now, I will warn you, you need to change the password. Change this password to something good and change it to something personal. Do not leave your password as just change me. That is bad operational security. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to enter our username. Username is user. Hit enter. And then the password, default password, change me. So what you should have now is you should have a screen that looks a little bit like this when you first log in. And the first thing we're going to do is you just want to enter in the word Whonix. And what this will do is this will actually give you a series of help messages. So the first thing we want to do when we log in is we want to change our password. So this is something you're gonna have to do for first time setup. You're not gonna do this every time. So what you want to do is you want to change the default passwords. So first thing you want to do is first you want to type in passwd, and what this is going to do is this is going to change the password. And you're going to need to do this so you can change the password to something better that isn't just the default password. So the next thing you're going to want to do is you want to run the Tor network. And you're going to need to do this through Gateway, so you want to connect through the Tor network. So what you want to do, you want to type in sudo Whonix setup, all one word. Hit enter. And then you're going to be presented with a big N-curses menu like this. So you'll be presented with a bunch of options, and you should pick the one that's appropriate to do. This is really similar to people who have used the Tor browser before. You can say, I'm ready to use Tor, I want to disable Tor, Tor censored or dangerous in my area, and this will actually present you with the option to use bridges or proxy firewall settings. But what I'm going to do is, because I live in an area which is safe to use Tor, I am just going to enable the Tor network normally. And then what this is going to do is this is going to go straight to the Tor network. And then I'm just going to hit enter. And then what this is going to do is this is actually going to run a series of scripts which connects me to the Tor network. And you can now see that Tor has been successfully enabled. And then you'll notice in the little text at the bottom, it says run system check exit. So what this is going to do is this is going to run system check, and this is actually going to synchronize the clock on this virtual machine to match the clock of the Tor instance that I am running. And you can actually see in the little bottom here, you can see it's about 30% done, and you're just going to want to wait till this says it's about 100%. It'll actually see I am now connected, and all of the apt repositories are now enabled. So we can get cracking on some of the fun stuff. So what it's just did was it now presented me with every single package that needs to be upgraded. Now, naturally, your first instinct is going to be, well, this looks exactly like when I run sudo apt update and sudo apt upgrade. You know, why don't I just run sudo apt update and sudo apt upgrade? Well, you actually don't have to. For the next part, this is actually less typing, and something that I'm actually going to recommend that people do is if you just type in upgrade, and you want to do dash non-root, because what this does is this upgrades your system without using root privileges. This is actually a convenience feature that was created by the Whonix team. So once you hit enter, what this will actually do is this will connect to the Debian repositories and their repositories and update your system so that you have all of the updates that you could possibly need. And notice how it did so without asking for my sudo password. That's actually one of the coolest features about Whonix. And you want to make sure this is fully updated. Now, I will warn you, this is going to take a million years because this is the Tor network we're talking about after all. But I'm just going to let this run in the background, and I'm going to disengage myself from this virtual machine because we're not done yet. Now that we have Gateway running, Gateway is going to be running all of our activities. We now also have the Workstation. And the Workstation is where we're going to be doing pretty much what you'd expect to do. And this is possibly like the only one that you should make duplicates of. You can make duplicates of Gateway. It's not really worth it because you only really need one just to connect to the internet. You can use however many workstations you want. I'm just going to be using one here. And what you can do is, now the first recommendation that I have is, and this depends on your computer, of course, you can change the number of CPU cores allocated. You can also change the amount of memory, and you'll notice that the amount of memory is kind of low, and you can actually see right here, I have 32 gigabytes of RAM. And I would like to take advantage of my Whonix system as much as possible. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to give myself 8 gigabytes of RAM. I think that's quite sufficient. And because I'm recording, I need to just save my CPU. I'm sorry. One of the other things that I also want to point out is you can't copy paste. So if you go to the display spice here and you go to XML, you'll notice that in the XML file it says clipboard copy paste no and file transfer no. And the reason why they do this is because the virtual machine guest agent spice could be used as a vector of attack to attack your machine. Now, for some people, I know that would irritate them, but what you have to do is you'd actually have to go here and edit the configuration file. So if you want to do that, you go back to your virt-manager screen here. What you want to do is you want to go to edit, then you want to go to preferences. And then what you want to do is you want to check this box here, which says enable XML editing. So click close. And now that we've enabled XML editing, what we're going to do is we're going to go back to this machine here, and now you'll see that warning is now gone, and we can actually change it. So if you want to add in copy paste, you can just change no, change that so it says yes. Now I don't think I'm going to be using file transfer. This is really so like if you drag and drop a file from like a GUI file manager, you'll see that I have Dolphin here. You can actually just drag and drop files to the virtual machine. I don't really envision myself doing that. But you have to be aware that when you do this, you are technically giving the virtual machine the ability to track what you copy paste and click transfer and all that other stuff. So just be aware of that. I'm not going to do this, but if you'd like to do it, just make sure you change it so it says yes instead of no. Next, what we're going to do is we're going to run Whonix, and it's again same prompt. You can either run for your daily activities, the top bar, But if you don't know you're only going to access the network and you're not going to save any changes, you can always just use the live user. So now you'll see I have been booted into Whonix, and then they'll be presented the setup wizard, and then they'll like, warning, do not continue if you do not understand anything. I know my audience, you guys all know Linux. Next, if you click understood. Now if you click not understood, this is actually really funny. If you click not understood and you click next, they're just going to turn off the virtual machine on you. Just say understood. You know what you're doing, okay? Come on. Click next. And then warranty information. We can't be sued if you do anything with this operating system. Yep, and then what you do is you click finish. And then what this will do is this will run the second part of the setup wizard, and that's actually this little padlock here. And what this is going to do is this is going to run a background system check. So it'll connect this workstation virtual machine. What it's going to do is that's going to go over and it's going to connect to my gateway virtual machine, which is now being updated. And while this is running, I'll try to show some of the applications here that we have. So look, I'm doing a distro review, right? Isn't it great? Obviously, the most important application to have in the arsenal of Whonix is the Tor browser. This is actually a modified version of the Tor browser, which integrates with their gateway system. So Tor's connections aren't actually done through the Tor browser here, but it's actually done through gateway. And they also have a lot of other tools for the people actually wanting, it's like the basic stuff that you'd expect out of XFCE. You'll also notice, look, they even have my personal favorite password manager, KeePassXE, an offline password manager. And they also have a graphical GPG key manager thing here. They also have, for some reason, XPDF. I remember this from a long time ago. It's not great looking, but it's a PDF reader. Oh, and they also have VLC, because what operating system wouldn't be complete without having VLC installed? They also have, oh, funny, we have a Monero wallet. You can give me Monero monies, but no one's giving me any money because people can't figure out crypto, including me, apparently. We also have Electrum for a Bitcoin wallet. Basically just have, if you're going to use like crypto wallets, you're going to want to use offline crypto wallets. And then if you also go to the documentation, I do want to comment too about like Whonix's documentation. Whonix's documentation is kind of a mixed bag. Like some parts of it I actually really like, and they actually explain some things like remarkably well. But then there are other parts where you can clearly tell people didn't update a page in like 5 or so years. So I am just warning you. And there's also like a lot of historical baggage too. You'll see that Whonix is actually running using XFCE, everyone's favorite lightweight operating system desktop environment, XFCE. Look, it's running XFCE. But historically, before XFCE, Whonix was actually using KDE. So if you ever see any documentation on their website referring to like using KDE, you know why. They now use XFCE, that's just how it is. It's just for better performance overall. Although they are in the hunt of looking for a new like Wayland desktop environment that is not Sway, by the way, because let's be clear, like most people cannot figure out how to use Sway for their lives. But one thing you can do is, again, they tell you right here, this is the report. You want to run upgrade non-root. So if you open a terminal and you run the same command here, again, you want to change the password. So if you go into here, passwd, change your password. But you can also do you want to do upgrade, and you want to do non-root. And what this will do is this will run the same updates that are being run on the on the gateway system over here. You can see they're still running. It takes a long time. And I'll open the Tor browser and sort of give you a little look around, because using the Tor, I covered this in a previous video, but using the Tor browser in Whonix is not the same thing as using the Tor browser as you know it, even though, it looks exactly the same. So you'll actually see here, they actually have a custom start page, and this will actually give you like a bunch of other access to a lot of Whonix's tools. And you'll notice they give you direct onion links to all the stuff that they do. Now, the other thing that you have is, so let's say if your IP check, your normal IP checking routine, check.torproject.org. Again, it's going to take a million years because this is Tor. But you also have things like their documentation. So you see here, look, you can connect to Tor. And then you'll connect to their documentation, which is basically their wiki. Again, it's going to take a while because this is a Tor network. It's going to take a million years. And you'll also notice they have a bunch of other, search engines that are a little more Tor friendly here, because they do allow, all of these search engines allow Tor traffic. But you'll also see that the Tor browser is being updated. And this is something just, I'm just telling you this because, like, again, most of this, like, the installation process is going to be you waiting on the slow Tor network for your updates. So just download all of your updates. So the reason why I open the Tor browser is you want to update the Tor browser, run upgrade non-root, and change your passwords. Because once you do that, like, you're pretty much set. Like, that's all of Whonix in a nutshell. You can go use this, like, pretty much like you would the Tor browser, except when you go to a page here. So let's say if I go here, normally there would be a button here which allows you to change circuits, but you'll notice that doesn't exist here. And you're like, well, why? How come that doesn't exist here? And it's because you don't actually change your circuits using the Tor browser. And like I said, you change your circuits using the gateway. So you actually have to use your gateway to change your circuit. And there's actually a way to, if you just turn off your connection and turn it back on again through gateway, what this does is this will cycle your connection so that you can change the location of where you are in the Tor network. And you know that when you install stuff in here, you can just install like all of the normal applications that you would expect to install like when you use Whonix. So for example, let's say you want, because if you look in the, the thing here, you'll notice there's no Office suite, right? Like what if you want to install like LibreOffice? Well, what you can do is if you do app search LibreOffice, look, you can still like download you can still download all of the exact same like Debian software that like everyone's used to, just as long as that program is like in the Debian repositories. So look, we have LibreOffice Writer and LibreOffice Impress and Calc and all that good stuff. You can install whatever, but be aware that there are limitations here. So for example, now in theory, I don't know why you would do this, but I'm sure someone's going to try to do this. If you try to install Wine, like Wine or the official Wine Debian repository on Whonix, I will warn you that Wine applications do not work correctly. And so if you wanted to run Windows apps on Whonix, I'm sorry, it's probably not even a good experience anyway. But if you wanted to run Wine applications, you can. And the reason why you can't is because Whonix has all sorts of kernel hardening in their system. So if you open the root directory here, so if you go to etc, you want to go to get sysctl, yeah, sysctl.d, you'll notice that there's a bunch of new kernel configuration files here which don't exist in other Linux operating systems. What's actually cool is you can actually add these kernel flags to your Linux operating system so that you can port over their kernel hardening features to your Linux system. And then you can just run like a grub mkconfig or something and reconfigure grub so that you can get these changes, because this is some of the stuff that's actually like unique to Whonix. And I will warn you too, doing some of this stuff has risk of diminishing returns. I mean, on desktop Linux is already an insecure hack, so like just be aware there's only so much you can do. But if you want to like do this, like go for it. There's actually the reason they do this is because Debian is Debian and not really that good out of the box. Like this video for distro reviews. Oh, I hate doing it. Sounds so messed up saying that. All right, well, thank you for watching. I'll leave a link to the wikis and stuff all in the description. So if you want to do this yourself, you can go and follow it. But go out there, use your Whonix, and be happy. We got a great 2023 ahead of us.